Have you ever noticed that some of the kindest people you've ever met are also some of the most tired people? The ones who always show up, who always answers the call, who always say, "Don't worry, I've got it." But if you look closely enough, if you really pay attention, you can see the exhaustion in their eyes. You can sense that somewhere behind that kindness is something deeper, something heavier. We grow up hearing that kindness is everything. Be nice, be helpful, be understanding. It's the first rule we learn, and the one we're praised for the most. But what no one really tells you is that kindness has another side. Like everything else in this complicated world, has a shadow. And when you ignore that shadow, when you pretend it doesn't exist, kindness itself can turn into something destructive. Sometimes it empties you out. It begins early. A child notices that when they please others, love feels safer. When they say yes, people smile. When they stay quiet, the room stays calm. So they learn, keep the peace, and you'll be okay. And slowly, kindness stops being a choice. It becomes protection, a way to survive. Years later, that child grows up. They're dependable, thoughtful, always the one people turn to. But they have forgotten what it feels like to be turned toward. They keep giving time, energy, forgiveness, until giving is the only thing they know how to do. You've probably met someone like this. Maybe you are someone like this. You will drop everything for a friend. You will listen for hours, even when your own head is loud. You'll say, "It's fine, I'm fine," because it feels selfish to say you're not. And after a while, you start to wonder why the people you care for so deeply rarely notice when you're the one fading. Kindness, when it never stops, begins to take pieces of you. It asks you to smile when you're exhausted, to stay calm when you're hurting, to keep pouring from a cup that's been empty for years, and the world keeps clapping for it. It calls you good, but deep down, you know it feels more like disappearing. There's a name for that: compassion fatigue. It's what happens when caring becomes constant, when empathy has nowhere to rest. Your mind grows heavy, your body tightens, and even simple things start to feel like too much. You can't feel bad for people anymore, not because you have stopped caring, but because you have cared past your limit. That's the quiet tragedy of it. When you're known as the kind one, people start to expect it. They don't mean harm, they just get used to it. They start to believe you don't need anything in return. And before you realize it, you have taught the world that your needs are optional. So here is the truth: kindness without rest isn't kindness anymore. It's a slow kind of self abandonment. It's watering everyone's garden while yours turns to dust. And eventually, even the best of hearts will run dry. It starts quietly, not with trauma, but with praise. A child learns that being easy to love means being easy to please. They discover that good behavior keeps everyone calm, that smiles prevent storms, that saying yes earns affection faster than speaking up. Each time they hide their feelings to protect someone else, the world rewards them for it. And little by little, kindness stops feeling like a gift. It starts feeling like a duty, like something they owe to stay safe. Years later, that child grows into the person everyone depends on: the helper, the healer, the one who says, "It's no problem, I'll handle it." And maybe they don't realize that every promise they keep comes with a small cost they never charge for: their own peace. They don't mean to disappear, it just happens, inch by inch, each time they choose harmony over honesty. until one day they can't remember what it feels like to be cared for without earning it. People around them see kindness. They don't see the tension in the shoulders, the sleepless nights, the quiet resentment that feels too shameful to name. Because how can something so admired be the very thing that drains you? Psychologists call it compassion fatigue, that slow, invisible burn that happens when your empathy never gets to rest. It's the exhaustion that settles into the body, the emptiness that hides beneath a gentle tone. You start forgetting simple things, meals, rest, joy, because your mind is always somewhere else, tended to other people's pain. And when you finally stop to breathe, the silence feels foreign, almost wrong, like guilt wearing the shape of peace. That's the tragedy of overgiving. It doesn't end with applause, it ends with collapse. Not all at once, but slowly, like a candle that burns beautifully right up until it dies. And by the time you notice, you have built a life around keeping everyone else warm without realizing you have been standing in the cold. There's a moment somewhere along the way when you finally notice it. You catch yourself saying yes while every part of you means no, and the sound of your own voice startles you. It's almost like hearing a stranger speak. That's when the truth begins to surface. You start to realize that what you have called kindness has often been fear in disguise, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood, fear that love might vanish if you ever stopped being useful. It's not that you want to stop caring. You just want to care without losing yourself in the process. But no one ever taught you how. Because most of us grew up in a culture that praises selflessness, but never teaches self respect. We call people good when they stay quiet, strong when they don't complain, selfless when they put everyone else first. But goodness without boundaries isn't strength. It's surrender. It's saying, I'll disappear if it keeps the peace. And peace built on your disappearance isn't peace at all. It's performance. A fragile agreement that only holds as long as you keep abandoning yourself. So here's the shift. Real kindness doesn't start with sacrifice. It starts with honesty. The same way oxygen masks work on airplanes. You put yours on first, not because you're selfish, but because you can't help anyone if you can't breathe. The same law applies to the heart. When you're gasping for air inside your own life, every yes becomes an act of survival, not generosity. But when you take that first breath for yourself, your giving becomes steady again, rooted, clear, real. Boundaries aren't walls. They're the lines that tell love where to flow and where it begins to spill over. A boundary says, I care about you deeply, but I also care about me. I'll help you, but I won't disappear for you. My empathy is a bridge, not a leash. It's uncomfortable at first. Your voice will shake the first few times you say no. People might not understand, but every small truth you speak builds a life that fits you better than the one you kept performing. Something happens when you start saying no. The world doesn't end. The people who truly love you stay, and the ones who only loved your silence drift away. At first, that loss stings, but beneath it, you feel something else. Relief. The kind that comes from finally telling the truth. Because boundaries don't push real love out. They filter it. They show you who can meet you halfway. They turn relationships from silent transactions into honest connections. And for the first time in years, you start feeling visible again. Not for what you give, but for who you are. You notice that when your kindness is chosen, not forced, it feels lighter. Your yes carries warmth again. Your empathy becomes a bridge, not a burden. People start to trust your words more because now, when you say you're happy to help, they know you mean it. Psychologists have a name for the opposite of this: pathological altruism, when the need to help begins to hurt everyone involved. It looks noble, but it quietly teaches dependence. The giver burns out, the receiver stops growing. That's not kindness. That's control hiding inside compassion. Real kindness respects growth. It doesn't carry people across every river. It shows them where the stones are. It gives without erasing. It helps without holding. It loves without losing itself. You start to see it everywhere. How our culture worships the idea of the good person, the one who never complains, the one who always forgives. But goodness isn't about being quiet. It's about being true. The best people you will ever meet are not endlessly agreeable. They're endlessly genuine. Because when kindness comes from truth, it doesn't exhaust you. It expands you. It invites others to stand beside you, not on you. It reminds the world that compassion and clarity can live in the same breath. That's the turning point. When your kindness starts to serve love instead of fear, when it becomes a mirror instead of a mask, that's when it finally begins to heal. Most people don't realize how heavy their kindness has become until they stop carrying it, until one quiet morning they say no, and the sky doesn't fall. They rest, and the world keeps turning. And in that small, ordinary moment, they meet a version of themselves they haven't seen in years, the one who breathes without guilt. Because true kindness doesn't demand your exhaustion. It asks for your presence. It wants you awake, not perfect. And when you start treating yourself with the same tenderness you have given everyone else, everything changes. You stop over-explaining your needs. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop mistaking depletion for devotion. And slowly, your kindness grows roots again. Not as a mask, but as something alive. That's when you realize you were never supposed to save everyone. You were meant to care, yes, but not to carry the entire world. And the weight you put down doesn't make you colder. It makes you honest. If you want to see the truth of someone, don't watch how kindly they treat others. Watch how gently they treat themselves. That's where authenticity lives, because how you love yourself sets the tone for every act of love that follows. When you rest, your empathy resets. When you speak up, your compassion deepens. When you draw a line, your love becomes cleaner, sharper, more real. It stops leaking from fear and starts flowing from peace. And that's the kind of kindness the world needs now. Not endless self-sacrifice, but people who can love without losing themselves, who can hold space for others without abandoning their own, who can say, I care about you, and I care about me too. Maybe that's what maturity really is. Learning that being kind isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about living in truth, even when truth asks you to rest, to step back, to be quiet for a while. Because the opposite of kindness isn't cruelty, it's emptiness. And you can't pour from what you don't have. But when you fill yourself first with stillness, honesty, and care, your kindness becomes radiant again. It glows instead of bleeds. So the next time someone tells you you're such a kind soul, pause for just a second. Ask yourself, is this kindness coming from peace or from exhaustion? From freedom or from fear? From my heart or from my mask? The answer to that question is where your healing lives. Because the real danger inside kind people was never their anger or their limits or their boundaries. It was self-neglect. And once you stop abandoning yourself, once you finally let your care include you, your kindness doesn't fade. It transforms. It becomes quieter, steadier, no longer something you perform, but something you are. a light that doesn't burn out, a love that doesn't disappear, a compassion that finally includes you.